My name is Gary James Joynes. I'm an artist working in Edmonton here. Actually, ironically, about exactly the same time, about 2 years ago, I was really inspired by a film that was made in the 60s by a Swiss scientist named Hans Jenny. And he was sort of working with some ideas that were originally founded about 100 years previously. A guy named Ernst Chladni, a German scientist, discovered the properties of waveform phenomena and how they could actually draw sound wave images in particles. And his experiment was really simple. What he did was he had a steel plate and he poured some sand on it and he drew a violin bow up the side of it. And it resonated and found a resonant property in the steel, and literally the sand pattern, just the sand will move right into the resonant pattern of the actual frequency that drew it. Hans Jenny took this even further and explored, built various different types of machines for exploring these properties in liquids. There's been a lot of artists that have come since that have explored what Jenny called somatic sound, or the science of somatics. There's artists using, again, lots of work has been done exploring the liquid properties of visualization of sound. Some artists have used magnetic properties with ferrofluids and done like three-dimensional sculptures. Some have used even sound reactive gases and stuff like that. I found all this stuff really interesting, but for me personally as an artist, and I guess also touching into my sort of minimalist aesthetic that I've been working with for years, I really saw potential in the original experiment that I didn't see really explored, and that was through my research, I basically found that in a lot of science departments or physics departments in universities, you'll see people who have built a wave driver machine, and you can see on YouTube this experiment of running what they call the Chladni plate, or the wave driver. And it's, basically it's like, oh, look what happens when you send a sine wave at a specific frequency, and you just dump some sand on this plate, and everyone goes, wow, look at that, that's really fascinating. And it didn't really seem to be explored any more than that, other than just the science experiment. And I felt, wow, here's a potential. I just started thinking all the time about what different ideas I could try to explore. If I could build a machine that was that I could actually finesse and actually feel like I was sculpting these images, and like the way that you would draw something, the control that you would have when you draw or you paint, or if you're a sound artist where you're sculpting sounds, and how much control we have with synthesizers and stuff like that. I really wanted to develop a machine that would give me that. So I basically just started kind of DIY, kind of hacked my way through building my first Chladni plate. I had bought, figured I'd try to rule out the idea. Originally we started with a digital oscillator, and I thought, I've always been using analog synthesizers in my practice for years. And realized the resolution of that being fairly infinite, I guess. And I thought, we actually got, when I say we, I had another guy who was helping me build the first one. And I don't know, I just wasn't happy with the image. I was just like, okay, we got it kind of working. And I was thinking, what would happen if I brought an actual analog oscillator into this? Would it improve it? And in theory, I felt it would. And that actually turned out to be the case. As soon as I actually started using actual analog frequencies, it seemed like I had a lot more control. So I decided at that point to invest into a really high-end oscillator built by a Swedish company called Joynes, and built a modular synthesizer that I was going to use as the basis of these to get this range of sine tones. And then through the course of about, 4 months, started building these machines. The very first one that I plugged in and tried, I actually blew it up within 5 seconds of me even turning it on, because I hit it so hard with it basically just, if you know how speakers work, the voice coil basically just literally jumped right out of the coil. And I was just like, and it took me a week to make it, right? And I was just like, so I was like, okay, well, let's build another one. So I've been working in the audio industry for a long time, so I was lucky to have friends who have old speaker baskets laying around and stuff like that. So I started collecting and trying to get really, really high-end bass drivers and stuff like that, because I figured, you know, I want something really robust that I can hit really hard. And eventually, through the course, I think I blew up 3 speakers, and then the 4th one, I actually ended up taking to the BAM Center, where I actually did all the experimentation. So I basically, how could I start? How this project started was I was jamming. I got invited to jam with some musicians and new media artists that were working at a residency in Banff. And I went there, and I'd previously been doing like live cinema, live audiovisual performances for many years, and I'd performed there a number of times, and had sort of become pretty good friends with the director, who really was enjoying the work that I was doing. And she invited me out for coffee one afternoon, and we were just kind of sitting around just talking, and she's like, so what's next, Gary? What are you working on? And I'm like, oh, I got this crazy idea that I saw this film, and I'm just so inspired to see what I can do with the visualization of sound. And she was just right on the spot. I couldn't believe it. She's like, well, on behalf of the BAM Center, that sounds like a really great idea, and I'd like to offer you a research residency. And I was just like, holy shit. So I went back up to the center and started telling some of the artists up there what had happened, and they're like, and like, I don't come from academia, so this is all kind of like blowing my mind a little bit. And they're like, do you realize that those research residencies don't just get handed out over coffee typically, right? And I'm like, no. Well, yeah, I was like, well, okay, but no, it's funny. They were like, no, usually you have to do a proposal, and it's a juried process, and you know, all of that. So then with the director's support, I applied for a research grant and was fortunate to get the funds, and ended up going to Banff for 6 months. They gave me a bunker down in the basement, and I basically locked myself down there for about 6 months and explored these machines, and really developed basically what I considered a musical instrument, or my instrument, or my drawing instrument for creating and shaping these images, which I'll show you shortly. I guess what I'll do is I was going to start just to kind of illustrate a little bit of my history of the live cinema and what that means. So I'll play you this really short demo of, I guess, the most recent live cinema performance that I've been working on. And I've been touring this around for the last number of years. It was commissioned by the International Leonard Cohen Festival, which you might think odd. How does an experimental musician, how does that work? What are you going to do with Leonard Cohen? Well, I guess the idea that came up with, that was the beginning of it, was I thought, you know, my favorite thing I think about him is the words, his wordsmith ability, and actually as a sound artist of interest, just the sound of his voice. He has this like deep baritone, rich, textural, like he smoked like 40 packs of cigarettes every week for, you know what I mean? Like, but it's got this textural, beautiful quality to it. And I had this idea that I would like to bathe the audience in just the textural aspect of his voice. So I ended up taking, I found a really short reading of some poetry that he was doing. I was searching for the lowest notes that I could find him reading a piece of his poetry, and I micro-sampled probably about 1 second of it, various notes that would kind of make up a chord, and then I time stretched them. If you don't know what that means, it's you're basically taking the digital sample and you're just stretching it over time, and then basically what happens is you can basically expand that over and make it really long. So, and I was referencing the idea of him being a Buddhist and stuff, so I had this idea of building this piece of these rolling bass mantras, like that, you know, I imagined him actually when he was worshiping or whatever, or when he was in meditation mode or something like that, he would kind of like exploring these sounds. And then in the performance, I brought in like 9,000 watts of subwoofers and just basically bathed the audience in these it was awesome. I enjoyed it. So I'll play like just a short clip of that because I think it's important to reference my previous work just really quickly, and I think it'll help to make sense of where I've gone with the rest of the stuff that I've been working on for like this project that I'm presenting today, which is a body of work I called frequency painting. The first this first series of this is an installation that I'm working on that's actually going to premiere next month, January 14th at Latitude 53, which I'm really excited about. And it's taken 2 years. It's like the whole there was the phase 1, which was basically figuring out what I could do and could I get the images I was happy with. Phase 2 would have been like really exploring and shaping and getting the captures that I wanted, like really pushing the artistic aspect of it for me, where so I really felt I was actually sculpting resonant frequencies. The third phase was I had an idea of, so I ended up with all these really beautiful images, and I think in a sense they stand on their own as visual images and could probably work in like a photo exhibit. But because I'm actually illustrating sound frequencies, I really wanted to bring the actual sound into it. So my installation that I'm presenting in January is I've chosen 12 specific frequencies, and all the pictures are going to basically be on the wall, and one picture will represent like an exact like 82.06 hertz, and that's the frequency that drew this picture. And the sound that's going to come from that, there's an audio system that's getting mounted behind it. And then I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if this could be interactive in some sense? And I was also at the time, I guess, kind of discovering the properties of binaural beating, and I'm not sure if you know what that means. Binaural beating is when you have two tones that are slightly detuned from each other, and what ends up happening, well, actually I'll illustrate it right now. This is 434 hertz, just a solid tone. So not really that interesting on its own, just a pure frequency. This is 424 hertz, so slightly lower. Now listen to what happens when I play both of them together. That's called beating. The frequencies are actually phasing each other out. There's actually I haven't done anything other than turn them both on at a similar volume, and they start canceling and waveforming them. So I thought it would be really interesting in this installation if I could do that essentially with 12 separate tones. And then the interactive aspect, because it's also the beating aspects and how they work is also related to the amplitude or the volume of the wave. So I thought it'd be interesting if I could use sensors or some kind of proximity sensor where people could actually move in the gallery space and actually control the volumes, and therefore all the sounds in the room would be modulating and intersecting and basically messing each other up and creating this opportunity for this totally evolving soundscape in a room that would never really be the same, and everybody in the room would have a completely unique experience with what they were hearing. So that's basically what I've built, and I've used. I guess why I'm here today at Dorkbot is there's technology involved in making that happen, and I'm one of those guys that would fall into your category as artist who doesn't know how to build the technology, and I found a problem solver who turned out to be a great friend of mine, Scott Smallwood. He's here from the university. He's the one that I basically described to him what I really wanted the experience to be. I already knew of Arduino processors from working at Banff and seeing a lot of other new media artists working with that technology. So I knew that you could use that all these different sensor types existed, and that various artists were exploring all these different ways of using technology and describing their vision. So that's what I did. I described this. Could you make me a box that basically sends out a specific frequency, which would be the frequency of the picture. And when I say picture, here I'll give you an example. This would help. So this is